Uh, is it the first time we are experiencing people indicating that they are leaving or that they've left ECOWAS?
I think this is the first time we've seen such a fissure in ECOWAS. But then what this does, it consolidates the divide between the countries under military rule and those under civilian administration. And then interestingly, we are now seeing the first practical step taken by these three countries under the Alliance of the Sahel State, which they announced somewhere in September last year. So, but then, when you compare the three countries under military rule and then Guinea, which is under military rule, you could see a different approach. Mamadi Doumbouya, in his own side, has focused more on administration and then seeking legitimacy for his regime, because somewhere last week he was in Rwanda. He visited Paul Kagame. But then we could also understand his approach, because he does not have internal security problem at hand.
But he's a military ruler too.
He's also a military ruler.
Okay.
But these three countries have, what do you call it, insecurity.
So Guinea is not asking to leave ECOWAS?
No, Guinea has not left ECOWAS, but it has been suspended.
Okay, so it's on suspension. But Mali, Burkina, and Niger, they
were
are indicating to leave ECOWAS.
Yeah, they've indicated to leave ECOWAS.
But they are also under suspension, aren't they?
Yeah, they were under suspension, and then there was this attempt to negotiate with them. And then, what do you call it? They felt that by suspending them itself, ECOWAS has failed to really respond to their needs. But let's also bear in mind that the coup itself has popular support. When the decision was announced,
Which country are you referring to?
The three countries.
All of them. All the coups are popular support.
Popular support. And then when this announcement was made, there were celebrations, I think, in Niger. But then what is the reason behind the popularity of the coup? Is because, one, they felt that those countries have been under overbearing French influence. And so when the coup happened, they took anti-French stance, to a certain extent, anti-French rhetorics. But they felt ECOWAS has become a tool that is being used by France to protect its interests, and that is where the anti-ECOWAS sentiment emerged from. Now it has now taken a new turn where ECOWAS is now divided. But then the question now is, what is the way forward? Because whether we like it or not, these three countries are landlocked. But then, unlike Burkina Faso, Niger and Mali seem to have consolidated their powers in the house. But recently there was, I think, not less than 3 coup attempts that have been foiled in Burkina Faso. We really can't say if it's just mere ploy by the regime to gain popularity or not. But it seems the recent one was more of a serious event, because post that incident, we had, what do you call it, Wagner. And Russia deployed troops. You know, when Prigozhin was killed, report emerged of Russia forming a new unit, which they call, I think, is the African Brigade, or something.
Under the direct control of Vladimir Putin now, that Prigozhin is dead?
Well, we can't say if it's under the direct control of Putin. But Wagner itself has always always enjoyed this shady, what do you call it, image. We don't know to what extent is the state in control of it. But what we can say for sure is that it's an arm of Russian foreign.
What are these photographs you see?
Yeah, this is a deployment, the recent one
of Wagner.
Yeah, of Wagner in Burkina Faso.
Wow.
So, and then to what extent has this was there coordination between Russia and this announcement? Because immediately we saw this deployment, few days we saw the announcement. But then it tells you to a certain extent that ECOWAS has really boxed itself in a tight corner, having threatened to use force in Niger, and then allowing the three countries to call it bluff, and fail to take a decisive action. ECOWAS have appeared to have become a toothless dog. And so this is another way of upping the ante. But prior to that, there was also a release by ECOWAS that explained they were supposed to be in Niger within the week, last week, for further negotiation with the military regime in Niger. But then they said that there was some technical issue with the chartered plane, so the flight could not move. Then subsequently we had this announcement.
So what's the future? Should they be taken serious? These three countries, should they be taken serious?
Well, first of all, their legitimacy have not been recognized by ECOWAS. Likewise, it has not been recognized by world powers per se. But then they've been, what do you call it? You know, we are facing globally alignment. The world is becoming more multipolar. So there are regional powers that are rising and growing in influence. So for whatever, what do you call it, whatever they lose within the structure of ECOWAS, will they have an alternative or not? Once they have an alternative, and that can entrench their regime, then I think this division would continue.
What do you think they have an alternative? You have to answer the question. Will you answer it in the affirmative? Do they have an alternative?
Well, they seem to have one. If the French have been kicked out and Russians have become the new, their new protectors, they seem to have won. And across board, in every instance,
can the Russians give them what the French would have given them?
Well, I think for them, it's not about Russia giving them what the French has given them. But the fact that Russia is there, it sends the image of that independence. There's always been the anti-French sentiment, particularly in Burkina Faso. It runs deep because of the legacy of Thomas Sankara. And across the region, over the years, French policy have not really been favorable. For certain, there's always been this argument about what are they really paying France for in terms of the benefit of colonial rule. So until there's a rearrangement, I think we need, the days of using the stick has been, like it has elapsed. We can't use the stick anymore. ECOWAS failed to take a decision at the point. They kept arguing with
but for the countries going forward, because economic sustainability then becomes a real denominator in these matters. Whether you can sustain yourself economically, whether your people are not going to die of hunger, they're not going to die of disease. These are the fundamental issues. That's why I'm asking you that, can the Russians, are they able to, do they have the footprint in the sub-region? Do they have the international connections, Russia? Are they a pariah state? If they are a pariah state, they can't help you that much. Do they have the international connections to support an African country in all of these health delivery systems, development agenda, infrastructural development, education? Are they able to do that?
Well, globally, Russia seems to be isolated. But then, for whatever isolation they face, they've been able to align their policy with China. So for whatever they cannot present economically in terms of finance, China is there to foot the bill. And that makes it very easy for them to survive. We've seen Venezuela, which is just in U.S. backyard itself, having survived despite the difficulty of the situation. Moreover, the socioeconomic situation or the problem would be a second, consideration. The most important thing at hand today in these three countries is the insecurity and the growing jihadi insurgency. To what extent have they been able to fight it? It's quite difficult to measure.
So who are their enemies and opponents in this fight of trying to create stability? Is it their own people? Is it renegade groups that have left the country,
then
the former president?
Then we have to look at these three countries in their peculiarity. Okay. Burkina Faso, in their case, they overthrew an entrenched regime of Thomas Compaoré, Blaise Compaoré. But then the army itself is not united. So beside the jihadists they are facing, there's a deep division within the Burkina Faso military itself. When Compaoré was in power, there's a particular thing he did was that the Presidential Security Regiment, the RSF, and then the gendarme, were his darling boys, because they were seen to be tools for regime survival. And then the main military itself was kept at a distance because they were seen to have influence of Thomas Sankara to a certain extent. They were a threat to the regime. So whatever you are seeing today, the prevalence of coup attempt in Burkina Faso tells you that this division has not really been addressed.
So that the enemies of the regime, those who are threatening the regime, are people from within.
And Burkina Faso is internal within the military.
Okay. In Mali?
In Mali, the problem in Mali now is that recently the Malian government opted out of the 2015 peace agreement that was supposed to reconcile the military government and the Tuareg rebels in the north. But what they didn't really, perhaps they should have considered, is the interest of Algeria in that situation. Because the chaos itself was born as a result of the collapse of Gaddafi's regime in Libya, post-NATO intervention, and the weapons trickling down. And we saw how it engulfed the region. But then the Islamists took advantage of it. But historically, Libya and Algeria always fought for influence within,
Lower Sahel?
Yeah, within Lower Sahel. We talk about the famous Libyan-Chadian war, the Toyota War. But then with the fall of Gaddafi regime, Algeria remains the next party. But what is the interest of these two countries in Mali, for example? For Libya, it was an attempt to portray Gaddafi as this omnipotent regional power. For Algeria, it's more about a security concern, because the bulk of the Islamist militants in Mali are of Algerian origin. the famous Mukhtar bin Mukhtar, an Algerian. So for them, the stability of Mali is akin to the security of Algeria because they share a long border. But now, having abrogated this agreement, if Algeria decide to also pursue a more securitized foreign policy and decide to back the rebels, because there's cultural similarities between the Arabs in northern Mali and the Algerian regime against the Islamists and by extension the Malian state, then the Mali government will kind of have difficulty in dealing with that situation because once they have access to weapons, then they will become a bigger threat.
Is Bola Tinubu not showing up as ECOWAS president the way we have seen ECOWAS presidents do?
Well, his rhetoric when he became ECOWAS chairman was firm that he wasn't going to tolerate a coup d'etat. But then he also failed to understand the dynamics within ECOWAS. There's what I call the Dakar, Abidjan, Accra axis. These are the 4 important capitals in West Africa: Nigeria, Ghana, Senegal, and then Ivory Coast. So if you look at prior to the discussion of invading, invading Niger, one conference was brought to Accra. It was initially postponed. It was Nigeria's attempt to get Ghana in, because had they gone to the point where Nigeria, Burkina Faso, and Ivory Coast, and then Senegal, have they invaded without Ghana? In terms of decision making, they will have outnumbered Nigeria in shaping the post-intervention space. But then Nigeria needs Ghana as a buffer. And Ghana refusing to commit troops actually thwarted that decision. So, but then Tinubu has a bigger challenge now, having given a very, very bellicose rhetoric. Now you have a challenge that you've not been able to address. And even internally, he himself, looking at the outcome of the election itself, to a certain extent within the East, he does not enjoy support. So there's this problem now. Nigerians feel like he has really lost the argument. There are those who believe that one of his reasons for that offensive approach was that he compared his time to Obasanjo. When Obasanjo was in office, Nigeria was everywhere across West Africa to douse down the fire. So now, having been a person that has challenged Obasanjo throughout his life, if that is one of his motivation, then he has lost out of that competition of being a regional power. Because under him, we could say that Nigeria has receded.
Wow.